Morning. Sorry, I've been fucking around with stuff. Haven't washed my hair today. I'm also not confident that the video capture is going to work because my main one shed itself, and this one is a cheap-ass backup. So let's just... Oh, it looks a bit jittery, doesn't it? Hang on a sec. I haven't used this capture card before. Fucking, it's so much fucking around, man. I have to buy another one. Oh, well. Never-ending expense here, people. Okay. Anyway, let's get to it. So I'm just going to turn the chat off for this one, for obvious reasons, because I've been in fisticuffs all fucking week with dickheads. One sec. Okay. Now, I don't normally do this whole, like, naming names, clickbait shit. So it's not clickbait, okay? I'm doing this because I want to make it very clear for everybody that might be confused that I don't support Katherine Deves, okay? As a person, yeah. Politically, during an election, no. And I'm going to explain why. And this has been causing a lot of division and destruction and fucking dickheads, the 3Ds. Let me just get my pen and paper. Anyway, I apologize. I haven't washed my hair and done anything. It's like off the back of the Easter weekend. I'm also a little hungover. And I look like shit, and I'm sorry. I'm going to try and get another capture card, but, you know, they're expensive. So I'm just using this cheap one and hoping for the best. But again, that's all just, you know, it's all just like whatever. Who gives a fuck? I've got something to say. Now, give me a sec. So, and obviously this is a live stream. I haven't rehearsed anything. I'm just talking. But I just want to talk through my rationale for why I don't think it's a good idea, especially if you're overseas and don't know how the Australian political system works, to be interfering in Australian political conversations that are quite sensitive, have a lot of moving parts, of which I will explain. Hopefully the sound's working. Yep, I'm looking over there. It seems to be. Good. Okay. That this is stuff I've been predicting for years. I've been warning, you know, the left about this for years, which is that if you continue to make this a blind spot and don't have an out loud, open conversation about this thing and stop ignoring it. Now I'm going to explain why that's the case as well. Okay. Because people are confused. People are confused about how politics works versus activism. It's always been a tension. It's always a thing, okay? You're a single issue activist, don't get how to legislate. They're different skills. But also, there's always those tensions. But also, you know, there's a difference between campaigning over an issue and campaigning to win government and the political outcomes that you want. First of all, like most importantly, with policy. Okay, what is policy? Policy is lots of different things, and it also depends on what your priorities are. Okay, now I just fucking mangled that sentence, but, you know, hear me out. I'm just getting on my... haven't had my coffee yet, so let's go. All right, bear with me. So, why I think it's a bad idea. Now, let me walk you through. Not about the person. Okay? It's not even about the fucking issue. Honestly, women's sports is so fucking down the rung for me that I just don't care. Okay? It's not a hill to die on, in my opinion. Whatever. Okay, move on. Who cares? It's not that big a deal. Okay, in the grand scheme of things. Who cares? But the first thing that I wanted to go through, it's not about the person. I just wanted to get some people, because a lot of people think that it is about the person, because idiots think that politics is personal, and that somehow the second someone is running for a key seat in a federal election, okay, with a lot of history to it, which I'll also talk about, a key seat in a federal election, that off the back of, you know, everything that's been going on with the pandemic and, cost of housing going up, all of these things. Too many thoughts at once. We'll work through it. You can tell I haven't streamed in a while when I sort of start fudging my words and fumbling and shit. I'll warm up. It's been a few weeks, so I've just kind of lost the muscle. There's too many things going on. Too worried about the fucking adapter and stuff. It's almost like you can't talk about the Australian legal system and political system and focus on lighting at the same time. It's almost like it's hard and uses a lot of brain power. But anyway, much harder than tweeting anonymously that I'm fighting for the sterilisation of children merely because I don't support a particular political candidate. But that's a whole other fucking... Or this one was in response to telling the UK to stay out of Australian politics because our system is, whilst similar and whilst a colony, you don't fucking own us. Our system's different. There's things in place that are different to yours. Okay. So let's start. Oh, how do you even begin to bite this off? So here's my thought process with this, okay? It's not about the person, okay? Fucking hell. The personal is political, but the political isn't always personal, okay? And when you make it personal and you make it bitchy, that's how you lose politics. That's how you lose seats. That's how you fucking end up voting against your own interests. That's how you end up voting for fucking governments that hate women in every other way. Dickheads. So, how our political system works. It's a beautiful system. Wonderful. Okay. I would say it's better than America's system. Okay. Now, the Americans will go, yeah, Bill of Rights. Yeah, okay. We don't, but we've actually got provisions in place that protect those things through conventions, okay? Something called delegated legislation, okay? Something called separation of powers, okay? And a balance of powers, okay? So we've got a hybrid system between the UK and the US, which is why neither the UK or the US know what the fuck they're talking about. Anyway, so what we've got here is we have a federal system of government, okay? Power defaults to the states, okay? So I'm not going to go too much into the weeds on constitutional law because this is boring as batshit for everyone. I'm already waffling and I want to get to my main point. But I just want people to know, I'm poking this pen, sorry, it's irritating. Okay. Poking with a pen. I want people to know that Australia's system is well designed, it is robust, it is a beautiful tapestry of varying checks and balances in our system. We're pretty stable, okay? So that's why it's fucking hilarious when everyone thinks we're going to fall, which what would happen if Australia was going to fall is that it would take 7 years to fucking decide which direction we were going to fall in, okay? There's a protective layer of bureaucracy. Now, this is something that Americans don't understand because, again, well, not Americans. When I talk about Americans, I talk about the political culture, again, not individuals, love Americans, but the particular conservative ethos that runs right through the American political system, which is small government, little government, anti-bureaucracy, all of that sort of stuff. Like, who cares? Bureaucracy works for the most part as a protective layer, okay, and keeps things fairly stable as well. There's pros and cons to every system. But how Australia is that we're much like America, power defaults to the states, okay? So most of our legislation, most of our operations, most of our policy, everything day to day, most of our legal system, our justice system, our criminal code. So we've got in our states, we've got, even with say West Australia, when I did criminal law, it's hard to even qualify as a lawyer in the eastern states when you've only studied West Australia. West Australia and Queensland have similar criminal codes to the rest of the country. They've got, so the power defaults to the states. That's all you need to know. But I'm saying we've got this rich, all of those things, okay? So I'm trying to really get across. So in Australia, we've got the federal government, the Commonwealth government, okay? We've got a federation. okay, of 6 states and two territories. Again, simplistically speaking, okay. Now, you've got the states and the state government, and then you've got local council, okay. Now, where Australia is different, somewhat okay, no, it's not true. It's not markedly different, but there are subtle differences, okay, between the UK and Australia, for obvious reasons. And a lot of our stuff is where there's legal gaps, okay? When there's legal gaps, it defaults to the states. It errs on the side of like not having a policy, okay? So what you don't do and you choose not to do in Australia is as much a policy as doing something in Australia. Like it's kind of weird, okay? A lot of our laws are somewhat out of date, but kind of we have a lot of informal convention, choosing not to enforce things, like with like you can have the letter of the law, you can have abortion laws, for example, on the books, or you can have like criminalization of prostitution on the books. You can have, criminalization of marijuana, but largely not enforced unless the police want to get you on something, and then they'll use, like that. It's this is the thing that's hard to explain to America because they again, the system isn't this way, but this is the political culture and expectation, which is that there's a law for everything and it's codified down to the letter because they're highly polarized. But for us, it's a lot more, driven by convention, informal stuff through policy. And when I say policy, I don't mean statutes. Okay, so you've got legislation that the Parliament passes, which is the law, which is a statute. So the Sex Discrimination Act, okay, is a statute. It's an act. Okay, it's passed. It's law, statute law. But a lot of what our law is vague. Okay, it bounces to the courts. It errs on the side of being legal to do unless there's a law against it. Okay, so we've got this, one of the criticisms around, Australia not having a Bill of Rights is bullshit, because what we did was we put these various things in place, which was that it was understood that the default is our freedoms. This is the default of our law. Rule of law is the default of our everything that we do, and that's okay. I'm not articulating myself clearly because obviously this is really complicated stuff, but I'm just trying to get to my reasoning, okay? Which is why stick with me on this, because I'm trying to explain how the law works in a really, really fucking year 9 way when it's this issue is really it's got a lot of moving parts to it. But I'm just trying to come with me and understand my reasoning. And this is why I can't have this fucking argument on Twitter or Facebook or anything, because this shit, it takes time to talk about. But so first of all, the default is freedom, okay? It's not codified. It is what it is, okay? Now that's something that you need to understand. Those conversations happened around our rights, around around this time of federation, and when they were drafting the Constitution, there was an understanding that we didn't need a Bill of Rights and that codifying rights would lead to bigger problems down the track, which is what we're seeing in America. Okay. Which is that we assume liberty. Okay, it's just assumed that way. Okay, assumed independence from the UK as much as possible as well. Okay, as much as we're allowed. It's a fun story, actually. I'll at another point, but I'll talk about that another time. But our system is robust. It is fucking amazing. It's beautiful, actually. I just love this stuff. This is why I don't like I was saying this earlier, I don't understand why people like conspiracy theories, because learning how things really work is far more interesting than any fucking conspiracy that you can come up with. It's beautiful. It's magnificent. Our system is magnificent. Anyway, so the American system is magnificent in a different way. It's a lot messier. And the UK, it's obviously there's that strong common law tradition. So anyway, the reason why I can't support, and I'm sorry for the name in the title, but I need to talk through my thought process here. Which is, first of all, our system is designed around a lot around convention, which is similar to how the UK runs, okay? But we don't have the history of, the Magna Carta. We don't have that same history that, again, it's not, there's different histories, different stories. Australia is that, okay, let me use a metaphor. When Australia was formed, simplistically, and now I'm not talking to people who know this stuff. I'm talking to people who just go, I don't fucking know, I'm going to donkey vote. I want to talk to you, or I'm not going to vote, which seems to be a weird fucking thing to be talking about with a suffragette flag. Talking to people with suffragette fucking colours telling them not to vote. Are you retarded? Okay, anyway, what? It's the one thing that fucking suffragettes really fought for, dickhead. So anyway. I'm in a good mood today, can you tell? No, okay, so let's get into the waffly stream. So let's say that, so Australia is the Minds. So minds.com, new social network, where there's been other social networks who've done stuff, made mistakes, and then Minds had the benefit of that experience. It's that learned, the thing that you learn from history if you pay attention, and you over time we benefit from all of the lessons and all of the knowledge that our ancestors have made. Okay, but in Australia we specifically looked at the mistakes, the gaps, what went wrong, what worked, what didn't in the United States and the UK in particular. Okay, and that's the thing that people don't realize, is that because we had the opportunity to properly design a system based on democracies around the world that we saw worked and didn't work, because we're a younger country, we had the benefit of doing that. So everything that we do in Australia has been really well thought through. It has been, it's fairly watertight. Okay, there's obviously loopholes and stuff now with the changing, the world changes and moves around, but, we're kind of informal back of napkin rights people. It's understood that we have rights, and that's the biggest misconception, I think, that Americans project onto us. Also, UK and US lawsuits are highly influential. Okay, so they're incorporated into as sort of a non-binding precedent. But anyway, that's a whole fucking. This is like year one legal studies. I can't be arsed. Boring as fuck. Study legal studies. Pay the money I did. Pay fucking go to school. So anyway, but you just need to know that. Okay, so one, my reasoning is our system has lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of factors that go into any one law. Okay, now, so this is the stuff that you need to know. First, most law sits with the states. So when you're looking at something like discrimination or sex, or sex discrimination, or Equalities Act, or equality, or with the exception of race has its own strange exception in the Constitution, which is interesting and weird. But anyway, it's funny. But when it comes to sex and gender, okay, it largely defaults with the states. First up, in my state, self-ID came up, okay? It was defeated at consultation. If you are following the correct consultation process and people get heard, you can defeat them at that stage. What we've got here is a consultation issue where, and this is why I intervened in the first place, I always thought that this consultation process had been hijacked. Consultation process was, people were being bullied into having an open and candid conversation at that phase. That's where you get involved, okay? Anyway, this is how it works. So when there's when someone wants to pass a policy, okay, or pass a piece of legislation, it goes open for consultation, public consultation. You can then, you'll have public various things, okay, depending on how good the community engagement is on a particular thing, or how controversial it is, or all of those sorts of things. Most people don't realize that this stuff is always happening. There's always a consultation. There's always a way to write. There's a minister to write to. All these things. Again, it all works. It's complicated. But self-ID was defeated at that stage. Didn't get passed. Didn't happen. The policy didn't happen. Okay. Now, if you've looked at my other videos around, how the way policies interact with other policies, they can never be taken as standalone things, okay? So when we went through the the juvenile detention thing. It's juvenile detention, not all prisons either. It was just in this narrow instance, okay, where, juvenile detention is happening. Oh, my fucking words aren't working today, sorry. But it's a young person who's got, who identifies as X, Y, Z. They're usually, again, having touched the juvenile justice system and know the reasoning behind this stuff, is that it's not, this child is extraordinarily vulnerable, okay? The children who end up in juvenile justice or juvenile detention are generally extraordinarily socioeconomically vulnerable. It's very much a place of last resort. It usually means that there's a strong link between foster care and juvenile justice, and there's that strong fucking, there's that constant, revolving door between the two. So in that context, also with that particular facility, it's a shared facility anyway, so there is no real issue. And what happened is it went into the internet turf machine and became, everyone in Western Australia, they're making it so that men can go into women's prisons. It's like, no, that's not what the policy says. It interacts with all the other policies, and then it corrects that. And in that particular instance, it's making it so that in a specific instance, in a shared facility, a shared sex facility anyway, with vulnerable teens, that when they, as part of their intake, you don't make a big fucking deal about their they themness, okay? That's what the policy said. You can go back and look at that. Now, apparently I'm a handmaiden talking facts like that. Anyway, again, it's just more you have to know how the system interacts with everything else, because it really does link to Kath, okay, and how this thing is playing out exactly how I suspected it would, which is that everyone is fucking campaigning for the Liberal Party, who are supposed to lose, and they won't, because you're being a dickhead. So anyway, how our system works is thousands and thousands and thousands of different policies that interact, so unless that it is specifically codified, it is assumed that you have certain rights, okay? Now, another thing you need to know in our Constitution is that anything where there is a conflict between states and Commonwealth, okay, between the federal and state government, if there is a conflict in law, okay, that defaults to the states, okay? If there is a conflict in law, the only avenue in which the Commonwealth can have law or pass law is under Section 51 of the Constitution. Now, there's several areas there, okay? But the main one here is external affairs, okay? Section 51, I can't remember, is it 26? Whatever. Section 51, external affairs power. Could have looked it up, didn't. But they have power over, things like marriage, taxation, what's the other stuff? Let me think. But it's very prescriptive, okay? Again, it's relevant. It's just a sort of throwaway comment. But it's like, corporation. Actually, corporations is a big one, okay? And defence, of course. And, they've got, weirdly, actually, it's really, again, this is a side point, but Section 116 in our Constitution actually prohibits the creation or requirement. It's actually secular clause. It's like basically, I can't remember the exact wording, but basically says, get your fucking God bothering out of our fucking government. It's really good. It's quite prescriptive. So anyway. But what you need to understand is, because we're having this is a federal election, okay, under which the contested law that everyone's fucking going on about is the Sex Discrimination Act, okay, of 1984. Now, that act was passed. So technically speaking, the federal government actually doesn't have any jurisdiction over this, okay? But the way that the government over the years have managed to sort of control things and take control away from the states is through loopholes, I guess, not really loopholes, but, through certain provisions in our Constitution, which is the external affairs provision. Okay. So the Sex Discrimination Act of 1984 was initially put in place in response to CEDAW. I love saying CEDAW. It makes me sound like a cowboy. It's the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, I think, something like that. Okay. That was in 1979. That's from the UN. Now, Australia also signed up to the, what was it, optional provision? Let me look at it. Hang on. Let me write this down. Optional protocol. Okay. Sorry, a lot to remember. But it allows you to, if the government, if you have a grievance and you're not getting anywhere, you actually can go to the UN and have an inquiry on sex discrimination, right? Now, so technically the law lies with the states. Okay, so it's the Equality Act and, all that stuff. Self-ID was, it varies on which state, passes which. That's 6 different laws. Federally, the Sex Discrimination Act really sits there because we had to ratify something that we signed, a treaty, which is the CEDAW, right? That's where it exists. And also it only exists under Section 51, which is that external affairs. I'm not going to go into fucking boring constitutional shit, but I'm trying to get to the point where I can see the strategy and I can see why that I'm going to defend Labor and say why I think what I think the strategy is. I don't know because I'm not in, but this is what I would do. Okay. So that act, okay, exists there as something that ratifies an international treaty. Okay. If there is some sort of dispute that gets to the High Court, you've actually got an extra step because we did sign the optional protocol. Okay. Now, again, that's quite simplistic, but I want to move on from that shit. Okay, it's boring. But you just need to know that. So in the grand scheme of things, okay, when we're talking about something as niche as trans women in sports, okay, so there's a few different acts, but you got Sex Discrimination Act, you've got employment law, you've got, again, under the limited powers of the federal government, okay, you have a number of different acts that they use their power to do. One of them is corporations, so they have some control over corporations, okay. That includes sort of employee, that's where like employee relations and stuff like that kicks in because they've got that power for over corporations. Okay, it's not so in the United States. I think corporations are state by state, whereas here it's a federal power. Okay, but anyway, that's a thing. Anyway, I fucking move on. So you've got that. So in the grand scheme of things, okay, this is why this is why I see how cynical this play is. Okay, put the pen down. How cynical this is, because really in the grand scheme of things, first of all, the Sex Discrimination Act is largely just, okay, it covers the federal government, it covers some corporations, it covers, anything with the federal government, but it relies on state by state legislation, all of who have ratified CEDAW, okay? Again, that's the law. I don't know why people think, anyway. So it's kind of a null law of sorts. All right. So that's the first thing, which is that when you're looking at a federal election campaign where there's a whole bunch of other policies, you've got to weigh up which one actually has an impact. And the Sex Discrimination Act, somewhat, it's you got to understand how these things work together and how you prioritize fighting over something that is largely handled by the states anyway. So that's the first thing, okay? So the issue that's being fought is fucking pointless. Unless you're planning to go and fight this at the UN and become foreign minister, which is, largely where it's probably going to be fought, then you've got to wait for the courts. It's going to be test cases, going to be test cases, going to be test cases, going to be test cases. At which point, I imagine that some of these like clauses of the Constitution will kick in, okay, and it will be fine. That's how we run. It goes through the courts, okay? Our judges aren't elected. They are appointed. It will go through the courts and it will be resolved. So that's another thing, which is that I think the ALP also know this. People who know how the system works aren't worried about this. They're having the debate online, but at the same time, these things, they work through the system, okay? So that's how it works. Second of all, okay, so this is what I think the ALP strategy is, which is that, because someone actually had an interaction with somebody the other day where they're like, oh, but Labor have it in their national platform, policy platform, that, set, gender identity is like blah, blah, blah. Anyway. Now, you got to understand how the national policy platforms work in a political party, okay? Parties have different factions. God, there's so much to fucking explain here. So parties have different factions, okay? Now, the ALP have always had a batshit faction, right? They've always had that. They've always had that infighting stuff. It's very famously poured out in our prime ministers, right? But the one thing that the ALP can't do in this election is give anyone any sense of instability or infighting. So what I suspect has happened. Now, you got to look at the makeup of the ALP is very broad. So you've got sort of full-on, socialist, you've got full-on woke fucks. Most of the woke fucks are sort of centre-left, like as I've said, woke shit's not left-wing. If you're focused on material reality, we've got a very strong, much like the UK, still got a strong Labor movement. The US Democrats don't. They're all completely corporate. This woke shit's coming from them, okay? There's going to be people that have swallowed that Kool-Aid, are politically confused, don't even know how fucking laws work, but they're annoying and they're noisy and they're on Twitter and we're trying to win an election, okay? Again, you've got to understand the history of Australian politics to know that the ALP is always on the back foot on maybe one or two issues, maybe two major issues, which is economic management and spending, okay, reckless spending, which is bullshit, okay, and division, so factions, because unfortunately the Libs have factions too, right? The coalition have factions as well, but they're just better at mobilising for an election. Now, what I see, if I was a political strategist in the ALP, which I'm not really affiliated with any party, even though I'm on the left, I'm not affiliated with any party, I'm independent. I have been in various political parties and realised that I'm better off being outside of political parties. But I do know how they work because I've been held offices and I've been an officer in a few of those things, and I've also been privy to and part of preference, all those sorts of conversations. So I know really how the system works within each party. Okay. Also, political scientist, not a fucking idiot. Oh, but that made me laugh. One of the experts who is just, oh my God. Anyway, said that because I say that that's wrong and I know what I'm talking about, that's what gurus and scammers say. Just trust me. And I'm like, no, trust me because I'm fucking qualified. And you see how many moving parts there are. I don't have time. This is why when I say, pay me, because I sit there and I go, do you know what, to refute this stuff and to debunk this stuff, I'm trying really hard to distill this as easily and quickly as possible. There's a lot of stuff. It takes time and money. It's just one of those things. If you want me to write an essay or you want me to actually write a proper piece, then you can commission me to write that piece. But, otherwise I just don't have time because I've got to make a living. Because, so anyway, that's what it is. And bullshit seems to travel faster than facts. It's funny how nobody's asked Taya to comment obviously I'm a little rambly because of new drugs and I'm tired and I haven't streamed in a while. But generally in an interview I can sit and explain stuff. So anyway, this is my reasoning, okay? My reasoning is that, first of all, when you understand where the Sex Discrimination Act fits in the broader scheme of policy and the interactions and everything, you're looking at thousands and thousands of fucking different interactive policies, okay? Because we also have a really, like I said, when I talked about informal, we also got this thing called delegated legislation, which is where the departments, okay, the government departments use policy. like one of the famous policies that I'm going to address, which when I move to the list of things that the Liberal government have done that fucking hurt women that Kath doesn't seem to give a shit about, okay, get your heads on straight, ladies, okay, is, so what they did, so here's a good example, okay, something that really hurts women, by the way, and poor women and single mothers, okay, and people killed themselves over this policy, okay, which was in 2016, a policy was passed, a stealth policy, okay, a regulation, as it were, where so Centrelink is our social welfare, so social security system, okay, that's what they're called, Centrelink, okay. If you have a debt with them, okay, that ordinarily, okay, sorry, I need to explain, sorry, there's a bit I missed here. So when you've got a statute barred debt, okay, so after 6 years, if you haven't paid the debt and you haven't admitted to the debt in writing, or, you know, you've just kind of ghosted on the debt or whatever, after 6 years, that debt can no longer be pursued. It's called statute barred. I don't know whether they have it in other countries, but we've got that here, okay. So if you just basically ignore a debt long enough, it goes away after 6 years, pro tip, except for the Australian Taxation Office, okay. And, you know, so there are some exemptions to that. So what they did was they passed a policy that said that got rid of the 6-year statute barring for Centrelink debts, which is social security debts, which means that, like, so if you, again, this is all complicated stuff. We got a million different fucking payments and all that stuff. But if you are overpaid and you have to pay that back, or they make a mistake or you make a mistake and you owe a debt, that debt no longer expires after 6 years. Now, they did this in 2016, just before this whole robo-debt scandal hit, okay? So what it did was it did, with data and stuff, data matching, it checked with the ATO and all of this and recalculated stuff and just issued millions of fucking debts to people. Most of them were, and they got it wrong, okay? They were wrong. So they were harassing people for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, mostly women, mostly single mothers, mostly families, okay? Mostly old pensioners who outlived their husbands, ladies, okay? And they were harassing welfare recipients and or people who, receive family tax benefit, mostly women, mostly children, okay? And they were harassing them, and several people committed suicide as a result of that harassment. That debt went through the courts and was ruled unconstitutional, okay? But what it also did, so through policy, okay, there was no legislation passed. What it was through policy. They passed this regulation that said that Centrelink can pursue debts anytime they like, okay? And basically, because we've also got that thing where with the ATO, they require you to keep 7 years of your records. And so basically, the government can chase you for a 10-year-old debt that you don't have documentation for, and they say, trust us, you owe it, and you owe it. Okay, that's what our government did. That's what Scott Morrison did. The man who loves and cares about women all of a sudden did that. That was a policy of this government. Okay, robo-debt, look it up. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so you got to know, like, you can, this doesn't matter, okay? But you've also got this thing called indirect discrimination, where that policy has that sort of indirect discrimination against women and particularly poor women, okay, and women and senior women, retirees and those sorts of people, okay. Centrelink handles all of that stuff. So there's that. Now, the other point was, right, can't remember what it was now. I lost track of thoughts. I actually really didn't want to do this video, to be honest. This is the thing. It's like, why am I doing Year 9 civics and explaining, like, I just felt like I needed to explain my rationale and how I got to, I don't support like this person, because also you need to know that Warringah, the seat of Warringah, which is the seat that she's running in, we've got okay, here we go again, explaining fucking shit, anyway. We've got 151 federal seats in Australia, okay? But how elections are won in this country is that we've got what's called key seats, okay? Key marginal seats. And those are seats that can flip, okay, back and forth, okay? Most of our elections are won and lost on a few thousand, sometimes a few hundred votes in a handful of seats. Now, the other thing is called, the others are called, they're safe seats, okay? They're considered safe, okay? For the Americans, you could probably, you look at Texas, which is clearly red, very red. You've got, California, which is blue. Think about that at the sort of the level, like the federal election. We've got 151 of those, and some of them are clearly red, clearly blue. Now, our blue is conservative. Our red is progressive, so you're going to be confused about that. Also, our government's called the Liberal government. It's confusing. Look it up. But anyway, so what was I going to say? Can't remember what I was going to say. Oh, yeah. So Warringah, the seat of Warringah. Now, Warringah is North Shore of Sydney, okay? It is one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest electorate in the country. Now, don't quote me on that. I can't remember, but I do know that that's Mosman. This is where the celebrities live. This is where the rich people live. It covers that fucking area, the rich people, okay? Now, what you need to understand about the history of Warringah is that seat was always held by the Conservative government, okay? Very safe, by large majority, okay? Always clearly blue, okay? For obvious reasons, because the money's there. I actually used to live there, believe it or not. I lived a little over, but I lived in North Sydney, but, Warringah was next to that. I actually know someone who ran in Warringah last time. I know that seat really well. Okay. But that seat was held by our former Prime Minister, Mr. Tony Abbott. And what happened in the 2019 election was that Zali, fucking my brain's too many things to remember, but an independent candidate wrangled that seat from our Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, very popular, in 2019. So that seat actually flipped independent for the first time ever with a large and decisive majority. Okay, so that's the context of which this is happening. Now, the Libs want Warringah back. They see it as theirs, okay? But because of the way that there's, I think the way that it went last time, there was, so the independent got large, 6%, I think ALP and Greens preferences and a number of other things got her way over the line. But what you're seeing this year is the same makeup, but what you're seeing is those sort of more micro, the sort of far right parties, right? I think Palmer's running candidates. You got the CDP running, all those things. But when you look at how these things can go, you got One Nation, CDP, and United Australia Party, which are all sort of, they're the ones who actually really legit fucking hate trans people. Okay, that's the problem that we've got here. Is when you understand the cynical play that's going on here, and also because I don't want to strip Kath of her agency, okay? Because if I did strip Kath of her agency, what I would do is I would say, well, you're being used and manipulated, okay? But I think she just wants to be in fucking politics. But what she's not just running in an unwinnable seat, okay? She's running in a seat that is traditionally the property, I guess, of the Conservative Party in Australia, the Liberal Party. And there's a very good chance that they could win it back. I don't think so. The independent candidate seems to be pretty popular. But people really voted because they hated Abbott, not because the seat is not Conservative, okay? But what we're looking at now is that there's going to be it's going to be interesting because you can see the play here, because Warringah is one of these key seats that we're talking about with this election. And the way that preferences flow, which again, I'd have to explain how fucking preferences work, but whatever, who gives a shit? Move on. Wouldn't want to be a guru who says, trust me, I know what I'm talking about. But we have a preferential system in this country. So, the way that the votes are distributed, what they are relying on is the vote of far-right parties. The accusation of this relationship with pandering to One Nation voters, pandering to fucking Palmer, pandering to CDP and the fucking lunatics, okay? All these fucking, crazy parties. As a block, their preferences will flow to her, okay? This anti-trans shit, okay, which again, I don't know, whatever. It's not so much about whether someone is, it's not about the issue. It's about the politics behind the issue, which is that, this is played out exactly as you'd expect, which is that she's being called trans. I don't know why anyone's surprised that this has gone the way that it's gone. Because if you understand politics, you're not surprised by any of it. Why are you fucking falling for any of this shit? Anyway, so, but the thing is, you need to understand the history of the seat of Warringah, how this is cynically being used to try and win back that seat, but also how it is cynically being used as, jet fuel to create this culture war narrative of cancel culture and the fucking crazy Labor left and all this, and all that shit. That Labor's woke and all that stuff that is absolutely not true. There's a faction in the ALP that believe a certain thing, like every fucking political party. Even the Greens have factions. They say they don't, but they do. Every party has its lunatics, okay? Now, but if you want to win, again, with our history of instability. So there's, like I said, that's right, there's two things where the ALP is on the back foot in a federal campaign, which is on fucking whatever, spending, whatever. That's bullshit. And I said this before, and the fact that we've had, the last time that Labor were in government, we changed prime ministers 3 times because of part of factional infighting and factional fighting, okay? Now, this is what I think the strategy is, and it's a good strategy if you want to win, which is to, so what I would have done, and this comes back to the wording of their national policy, which is when you understand how relatively unimportant and insignificant the Sex Discrimination Act is in comparison to other policies, okay, what I would have done is throw the wokes a bone at national conference in order to get a policy platform that I can actually win with. Because you've got a, conservative wing of the ALP, you've got a capitalist wing, you've got a, a socialist, more socialist, you've got unions, you've got all these things, okay? It's a rich fucking tapestry of lots of different people and all numbers. But the thing about national conference and national policy, and state, okay, this applies as much for state as it does national, which is that most of those policies are negotiated and decided on before you even get to conference because of the numbers, okay? So what they do is, it's not that, so this policy platform, this is how political party policy platforms generally happen. And same thing with the Greens, okay? Greens is slightly different in terms of process, but, overall, there's a lot of, sometimes what you do is you throw in the batshit clause in order to placate the activists so you can fucking win, okay? And this is again, that tension between activists and people who want to win which is that sometimes you've got to negotiate things away in order to get what you want. Now, I would imagine that, again, I wasn't privy to this, so it's just seeing what I've seen at various conferences over the years when I was involved, was that there's been a deal somewhere, which is these guys are going to be a problem. If we piss off this faction or this group of people in our party, they're going to cause fucking heartache for us. We can't be seen to be divided during an election campaign. Let's give them this. It has no real meaningful, thing legally. We know this, okay, because apparently we're in politics and need to know how policy works rather than just talking out of our asses, okay? If you're actually a political strategist, I can see how this would work. But this is, again, I'm reverse engineering what I've seen. I could be making stuff up. Don't quote me on it. But I'm just saying this is why I don't feel comfortable supporting this particular candidate. So what I think the ALP has done is negotiated that away, knowing that it's not going to really affect anything, knowing that it'll go through the courts. See, and this is another thing. Politicians will bump shit to the courts as much as possible. They don't want to face anything. So that's why they make legislation like deliberate, like vague and shit, because they go, oh, the courts will sort it out. Again, that's that's our political system is largely that. Giant bottle of soda water. It's good. But that's how it works. So writing legislation is a small part of the law. Again, it's got to be enforced. Got to be regulated, the details, it's got to, one thing about being a public servant in Australia is that, you pass a law, but it takes years to even get the department together and the people together and the project together and the meetings had. And, it's like, it's an easy way to actually kill a law is to make a law, right? It takes a long time to implement these things because of the way that things are made up. The fact that we function is surprising more than anything. But so it's why I kind of quit the public service and realized I couldn't really do anything of real value, was because I realized that it was mostly pissing in the wind most of the time. One of my contracts when I was doing policy work back when I was a grad, and this was when I was pregnant with my son. So I'd taken a 6-month contract because I knew that I was going to not be working anymore. And then I went into digital and it went from there. But I had a 6-month contract there on a project. And my job as a state government, I won't say which department, but it was a major department. And it was a major project, very important project. And my job for 6 months, because the project had stalled because we were trying to get a signature from the federal minister. And basically, my job was to respond to anyone who asked what was going on with the project, like do ministerials, write ministerials, which was, after a while, copy pasta because the answer was the same. So if the minister got any heat, then that was my job to write a response and to do have meetings, but most of the meetings weren't happening because the project was stalled. And it was my supervisor's job, not my job, but my supervisor's job, to call them every couple of days to ask where the signature was. And everyone else just browsed just fucking hung out on the internet and, blogs and shit, okay? Because the project was stalled. There was nothing we could do. There was no work to do. It was fucking hilarious. But that's how, that's why it's funny when people just think that like a statute or a single act is just, it's like, no, you got to implement this shit. People don't realize how hard it is to actually implement. But anyway, politicians know this about the system, and they'll bounce it off to committees. They'll bounce it to the courts. They'll make shit vague and go, yeah, let the court sort it out, because they don't want any heat. Now, one thing I will give Kath is that she's been brave in having a direct conversation about this without doing that, because most people will just go, yeah, fuck it, go to the court, right? That's a brave thing for a politician to do and to face it head on. I also understand why the Labor Party won't face this head on, because what they'll do is they'll go, okay, let's look at the legislation, and they understand the complexities, right? Also, it's probably not their priority. They've realised that, I imagine, this is again guessing, that the fucking woke fucking idiots on the internet, okay, are going to turn on Labor or turn on you and make it impossible to win. And the one thing that you can't do, because again, you have to understand that the coalition, much like the GOP, that certain aspects of the GOP are so bad faith and they will do anything to win, that showing weakness in any way, you have to understand what happened in again, I can go back to 2001 with Tampa. This is a template that they use, which is to take an issue that divides people or has, some grain of truth in it, some issue, some real serious policy problem, turn it into turn it into something that makes the Labor Party look weak or look disorganised or look, what's the word? Fractured. They want to try and poke these factional wars as much as possible. So one of the big things that they do is goad the left into those divisions that I've talked about a lot, right? There's our tendency to fucking anyway. But there's a difference that can happen when you're not in when you're in the day to day. But when you're in an election campaign, you can't. You need to show unity. You need to, again, knowing that most of the election is won on a handful of swinging voters in key seats, and the swinging voters care about these things. They're fucking easily malleable. They're easily swayed. They're kind of what's in it for me. All those people. That's why we keep losing. So there's certain just no-go zones that won't get anywhere, because it's the way that our system is designed. It's hard to, you can't win on policy when you've got swinging voters. You've got to win on various things. And yeah, anyway, I've fucking lost my brain. So with that in mind, this is what I think is the strategy, which is, because the last time the Labor Party was in power, power in government, which meant basically, because remember, we don't have a president either. So basically means that it's not even in, political parties aren't even in our constitution or anything. They're not really recognised. They're recognised by a convention. But so basically it means that they're the majority of seats in the lower house of the government, the federal government, who has limited power. So when you talk about power, it's like, okay. Because you still got to get through the Senate, you still got to get sign off, all those sorts of things. A lot of this stuff, again, is ruled by a convention. So so I can see how in the grand scheme of things, this Sex Discrimination Act issue, especially fucking sports, which is niche of a niche of a niche of a niche, you should always be suspicious when the coalition use this stuff as because they use wedge issues, right? And that was the thing that I warned about. I've warned about this for ages, okay, which is that it will be used as a wedge. This stuff is coming from the United States. It's going to happen here, and here we are. Now, Kath should know this because I don't know about politics. I would think that you'd clean up your tweets if you knew you were running for politics. There's a reason why I don't run for office, because I say dumb shit, and I don't want that. Don't be a dickhead. That's running, especially running in something where, it's contested and controversial. Well, anyway, whatever. You should know better. So first of all, I'm not stripping her of her agency. I would say, well, okay, the people who support Kath unthinkingly and are now announcing that they're voting for the coalition for the first time in their lives, you've been had. Okay? You're the ones that are being that are gullible, but I'm also not stripping you of your agency either, which means that if you can vote for that government over this, that means you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Okay? So, Kath, I'm not stripping her of her agency, like I said. Maybe she doesn't know she's being used in this way. Maybe she is just, maybe there's tunnel vision on one issue, and let's be charitable and assume that she didn't really want to do politics and she got the call that I did. Okay, I got the call, which was, do you want to run to defeat this woke shit? And I said, no, thank you. So anyway, let's assume that that conversation was had and she was presented with a choice. And she is pro-woman and girls. So more of my reasoning here is women's sports, slice of a slice of a slice of a policy of a government that has limited power. It's mostly with the states and international law and, all that sort of stuff, okay? Or lots and lots and lots and lots of little policies. Maybe she wants to be on every committee. Okay. But if you care about women and girls, rather than this slice of a slice of a slice of a thing that doesn't have much power and limited power, okay, what about aged care? Women outlive men and live in aged care for a long time. What about the revolting slop that our government lets, our elderly, if you see what our elderly people, elderly citizens put up with in our aged care, public aged care institutions have, put up with. I don't know how you could vote for this. Okay. What about senior women? Okay, the largest growing group of homelessness, largest growing group of people, right, who are, sorry, I'm on Lyrica too, so it fucks with my head a bit. I'm still adjusting back to the new doses. Sorry about that. It fuddles my brain, but bear with me. If you, but women over 55 are the largest, biggest growing group of people who are homeless. Okay. Does Scott Morrison give a fuck about that? No. During COVID, okay, yes, he did do some necessary injections, like the Job Keeper and Job Seeker and all that. But generally speaking, there's that Centrelink robo-debt thing that I'm talking about. Robo-debt, that fucks women up, fucks children up, okay? That fucked children up epically. What about the fact that the Morrison government sent every small business and most solo businesses, actually outside of, trades and stuff, in services, most solo businesses are women because they work at home and they, freelance and all that sort of stuff. They were sending everyone with sort of small business, they were sending them debt collection letters and giving them fines for non-lodgement of their stuff during the pandemic, whilst doing all of this other stuff for Jerry Harvey, right? Just saying. That affects women too. Okay. What about immigration and detention? Now, this is one where they're kind of they're both on the hook for this, but I would argue that one is pretty arguably worse. You care about women and girls then when they're in a fucking detention centre? What about, all of the policies of the Liberal Party that centre around this idea of a fucking 1950s family? What about the fact that our Prime Minister is in the Hillsong cult? Okay, which is not pro-women in any way, shape or form. If you've fucking met these evangelical Christians and you look at the books they read, the Women's Devotional Bible is a fucking treat. I need to go through that with you sometime. Okay. You care about women and girls then? About COVID relief, where a bunch of women ended up having the vast load of fucking daycare, having to, deal with sick children, maybe get sick themselves. What about, and all of the domestic chores and all of the domestic labour and all the responsibility for feeding them fell on the women. Okay? And those who did work at home, here's another thing. They didn't increase the amount of deductions that you could make for home office expenses. They still had those caps. Okay? They didn't change the policy in any way, shape or form in a way that favours women, okay? Do you care about women then? What the fuck? What about education funding? Okay? What about retail, service industry? What about nurses, teachers, female-dominated industries? They don't give a fuck about them either. Let them exist on zero, again, some of those things are state, some of those things are, state issues, but through loopholes with grants and funding and tied grants, all that sort of stuff, okay? Private schools get more funding per student than public schools, okay? Public money goes to fund the top fucking, 10% of private schools in our country, while our state public schools are starved out. That's a matter of policy, okay, for the government. What about the anti-LGBT? What about this religious freedom bill, which again is unnecessary because our constitution already says it, okay? What about the broad range of sexual harassment that exists in the coalition? Okay, this isn't unique to any one political party, but it's worse there. Okay, what about the disaster relief, bushfires, flooding? Okay, bouncing that to the insurance companies rather than actually doing anything meaningful. That affects women. That affects girls. Okay. What about the fact that, most women, again, that cohort of women over 55, you don't see. What you care about is elite athletes. You don't give a fuck about women over 55 who are increasingly retiring with no superannuation and, and living in poverty, okay? What about higher health insurance premiums? That affects women and children. What about, even just things like payday loans policy, restriction on payday loans, that affects women. It's, again, because it's just so short-sighted. This was my reasoning, which was that there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of actions and policies, okay, that are anti-woman with that party. And so I can't help but see that you are running in something where you could, if you play dirty and the preferences flow, if you pander to actual people who actually hate trans people, that's whose preferences that they're going for, okay? They're not going or going for, the conservative chunk of Labor voters, which, for those in in Warringah particularly, you'll find that they are largely, they're Labor, but they're still fairly conservative Labor. There's not many fucking full-blown Marxists in Wasman, right? In Warringah. But they're trying to appeal to that, okay? And this is the thing, is by creating this massive, putting flames on something which I believe is being settled as we speak. It's working in real time through the courts. The process is working as it should. I think there is a problem with consultation, okay? Yes. Making sure women get heard, yes. Death threats, okay? No, okay? All these things. Is she transphobic? I don't think so. But is she pandering to a fucking bunch of horrible transphobes? Yes. Okay? And that's why I can't support it, because when you know how the system works, when you know how the laws interact, when you know all of this policy, okay, the fact that, retail workers, the frontline workers that everyone loved in the pandemic, that government has fought unions, reduced wages, fucking, casualised everything, slowly chipped away at unfair dismissal laws, all of these things, okay? But, who does retail? Yeah, it's men and women and stuff, but, these jobs, casual jobs, part-time jobs are statistically, guess what? Hello, women and girls. Like, I don't understand. Like, this is hilarious. Maybe it is just one idiot, but they're influential idiot. But they sit there and I go, you know what? I've thought this through. There's 100. I could keep going for hours and hours and hours on why supporting Kath Deves is a bad idea. Because what this does, and also I'm not even going to talk about the cynical stuff, which is where they're obviously painting her as a victim of cancel culture to spread this fucking narrative of being picked on. Like Scott Morrison saying, I don't even understand. She's just saying something. It's like, no, she's not. Just like it's not just a fucking billboard saying adult human female. Just like it's not a benign question to ask someone, what is a woman, publicly on Twitter, knowing that you're starting shit. Okay? Do you know what? That's what bullies do. That's what people who are causing trouble do. That is what people who are trying to fuck things up do. Stop hitting what? There's like that, well, you said not to touch me, so they're doing this. Don't touch anything. Remember that when you were a little kid, you're like, don't you dare. And they go, just close. That's what that question is. And you know it. Okay? And the thing is that, like I said, like Australia, like I run based on other things other than just the literal action, okay? I can see intent. I can see, subtext. I can see all of these things. And I know that when you start asking Jane Caro, what is a woman in public, she's going to go, oh, for fuck's sake. Okay, Jane's written several books on this issue. She has probably done the trade-off. She's probably like me, where I wish I had said less because I've been put in this bucket that I don't necessarily endorse or agree with. There's stuff that I regret saying. There's things I regret, if I could go back, I would have been more measured about it, okay? And this is the thing. Anyway, I've wandered off. But you're being used and manipulated Whether Kath is, I don't know. Again, I think she's a grown-ass lady. She has agency. I've thought this through. I know that this was not very coherent, but, you know, at the same time, like, our system doesn't work the way that you think it is. I'm happy, actually not, I'm happy to come on and explain this to anybody who's interested. I know nobody is, because this culture war shit. Now, this is what, again, Graham, I've seen a notification that he's saying Katherine needs your help. No, she doesn't. This is playing out exactly how it was going to play out. The media are doing exactly what they were going to do all along. This is deliberate. There is no such thing as digging through old tweets. If you're running for office, you get a PR firm and you clean that shit up. This is on purpose, to win a fucking unwinnable election, with all to distract from all of these horrible policies of this government that destroy the lives of women and girls daily. They're not pro-women, okay? Oh, don't worry, I've just fallen for party propaganda. No, fuck yourselves. If you vote for this stuff, especially if you're not in that seat, if you vote Liberal outside of that seat, you're a fucking idiot. Okay? You can use your vote however you want, but you're a fucking idiot. Okay? It's not how, it's just, what the fuck? Because someone was mean to you on Twitter. A bot fucking told you that they were masturbating, and like, fucking critical thinking, people. Facts. Learn how things actually work and function. There's a difference between this fucking crazy culture wars bonkers shit, which is entertaining and fun, and an actual election that needs to be won by people who, you know, aren't trying to fucking starve everybody into fucking poverty. They're doing nothing about housing affordability. Did you hear that one? People who rent should just buy, people who are struggling with renting should just buy a house. That was the guy who loves women. Does he want women to have houses? Women, you know, again, single mothers, you know, all that. Women are disproportionately affected by all economic policy. And there's a multiplier there if your skin colour and your race and, you know, all those other things, socioeconomic background and all that sort of stuff. Okay? But when you know Warringah and you know whose preferences that she needs to get in order to win and who she's pandering to, you can see how she's useful, because they want Tony Abbott's seat back. And I wouldn't win that way. I wouldn't want to win that way. You want to win fair and square. If she's not transphobic, then why is she letting herself be used by these people? Now, I understand the argument that you're not responsible for what other people think and say. But if it's clear that this is a cynical exercise, I would not allow myself to be used that way. And the second that I saw that this was happening and coming is the second that I flipped and said, no, if that is the end result of this thing and this issue and being involved in this issue in any way, if that is the end result in policy, then I'm out. But most people are like, no, this issue is the only fucking thing I can think about, because all I do is fucking hang out on Twitter, which is mostly bots. And all I do is argue with fucking, you know, people I don't even know are real, because I don't know if they've got real names or not. I don't know how the system works at all. I don't know how laws are passed. I don't know anything about anything, but Taya's the cunt for suggesting that I'm the one who is advocating against, like, I hate women. I'm a handmaiden. Who's a fucking handmaiden? You're gargling the balls of someone who fucking openly advocates that those that are disproportionately affected by, you know, well, his gutting and stripping everything that was good about this country for parts, those that are, most affected by his shitty fucking government and their policies and their actions. Who's the handmaiden? Yeah. Anyway. Gets me fucking wound up, man. Jesus. Anyway. Vote how you want, idiot. Anyway. Listen to the suffragette flag troll account telling you not to vote. I reckon they're more credible. Wouldn't want to be a guru who just says, trust me. That was said. Pretty funny. I just laughed. I was like, dude, this is someone who was pretending that, saying that they're a digital expert and they're an expert in everything, but they're actually just not very, they're not. But then they accuse people like me who are actual experts of being fucking scammers and gurus. It's funny. Anyway, but the problem is that these people, the truth doesn't matter, Anyway, I look like shit. Sorry. I don't look at myself on camera anymore. But I'm going to go. I hope that this was at least a little useful. And you understand my reasoning at least a little bit. Okay. I could go on for hours about our system and how complex it is, but it's just really, like fucking hell. Like you're falling for just nonsense. That's mostly from the UK. That's mostly, like in that battlefield, which is a different one because they've got a multi-party system. We've got a multi-party system, but it's again, it's different setup. Okay. But also where there's no real legal teeth in any of this. Like you pass legislation, but the power's with the courts. And the default is that you have the right to not be discriminated against based on fucking characteristics you can't change. Also, it's funny because if you end up, it's funny because there's, there is a cult aspect to this. There is a religious aspect to some of this American gender stuff because that's the American culture, which is that they're sort of prone to mystical thinking and magical shit. Okay, that's why there's so many gurus and the celebrity worship and all that stuff is they tend to be a little into the ironically false gods. Okay, but here it's. So if you, I was thinking about this because I was refreshing on section 116 about religion. Okay, as you do, everyone does that, Taya. That's perfectly normal to reflect on this section 116 of our Constitution, because I'm just a guru who talks shit for all that money that I make, literally losing money while I sit here because I got paid work to do. But I'm like just a guru who wants all the money. You go fuck yourselves. But I was thinking about that section 116 clause and how that may actually trip everyone up because you can't, there's actually like a provision that outlaws the requirement. So you could actually quite argue this in the High Court. It's going to be an interesting thing where with Maya's case around belief, okay, and gender identity. But in our Constitution, what we've got is this idea that you can't make any religion built into the system. So you can't require someone to be religious, or you can't create a state religion. It's very anti-religion, right? Ironic given our fucking Prime Minister is a fucking God botherer. But anyway, it's just I believe it's a conflict of interest. I don't care if he's Christian. I think that it's a conflict of interest, church and state. I think that if you are, I don't think that anyway, side point. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, section 116. But if there's all this talk about this gender identity as religion, section 116 has been broadened and loosened in terms of definition to things like belief, okay, and an implied freedom of expression and the intention behind 116. So at some point, I don't think that if it gets to the High Court in any way that you are required to use pronouns, I believe it's actually unconstitutional. again, I'm not a constitutional lawyer or scholar. I'm just saying I suspect this is the angle that you can use, which is that, if you are forced to comply with a specific ideology in order to use a platform, which again, that might be an angle with Twitter and Facebook too, is actually, that's a good angle. I should look into that. But there's an implied, if subscription to a specific worldview or belief is a requirement for you to participate in public life, then that is actually unconstitutional under Section 116. Now, again, that's an interesting argument. But again, this is how it works through. Work through the courts, and we go, oh yeah, that's interesting. That's cool. All right, interesting. But I don't know what people think government does. What do you? I'd be interested actually if anyone does watch this and see that, and like what you think government does, and how laws work, and how on a day-to-day basis, how you don't just write a thing and it happens. It's not how it works. And this is another frustration I have with business people who think that you can run. I'm doing another stream on Elon Musk, like this, the Twitter thing with Elon Musk. I wanted to do this one and waffle with this one because it's low stakes for me. I don't care. There's nothing really here. I just wanted to explain my reasoning and my point of view, and hopefully that came across. But, this idea that you can run a government like business, it doesn't work that way. You can't do that. You're not the CEO. Okay, this is a democracy, and it interacts, and there's checks and balances and all those sorts of things in place for a reason. Okay, so it's just really interesting that people seem to think that you can just write a bill and it's the law now, and then it's automatically going to translate to like nobody being discriminated against, or it's just like, or nobody being in a fucking public toilet. It's just like, what the fuck? It doesn't work that way. So anyway, I'm going to go. I've talked too long and waffled too much, and I look like shit, and I'm tired. So sorry for the bad lighting and everything, and I've just got to get. Hopefully this has worked okay, but who knows? Okay. Anyway, I love you. Bye. Where's my phone? Hang on. Bye. How do I say bye? Where's my buttons? Stop. Bye.